Harris's calculation in choosing a lesser-known running mate.
Instead of opting for the Pennsylvania governor to sway voters in this crucial battleground state, Vice President Kamala Harris has placed her trust in Tim Walz, a safer choice for the vice presidential slot. Last week, Vice President Kamala Harris selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate in the White House race, bypassing Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who had been widely expected to be her choice. This decision came as a surprise, especially since just weeks earlier, Walz was not considered a likely candidate for the position. In fact, he is relatively unknown outside of Minnesota, despite having served 12 years in the U.S. Congress. Born in rural Nebraska, Walz joined the National Guard right after high school. He later attended Chadron State College, graduating in 1989 with a degree in social science. After graduation, he spent a year teaching abroad before returning to the U.S. to serve full-time in the National Guard and eventually becoming a high school teacher. Walz represented Minnesota in Congress from 2007 to 2019 before being elected governor in January 2019, a position he has held since. Harris's choice of Walz brings a progressive, straightforward voice to the Democratic ticket, appealing to voters in the rural Midwest. The Blue Wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are critical to Harris's election bid in November. These Democratic strongholds were pulled into Trump's camp in 2016, but were reclaimed by President Biden in 2020. Although Walz does not hail from any of these battleground states, he represented a large rural area in Minnesota, bordering Wisconsin, during his time in Congress from 2007 to 2019. Walz's experience in winning support from rural voters is seen as potentially helping the Democrats secure the Midwest and shielding Harris from criticism that she is an urban elite disconnected from the working class. Currently, Walz serves as the chair of the Democratic Governors Association, a role that has provided him with substantial fundraising experience. Walz's selection as Harris's running mate is viewed as a victory for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Since becoming governor, Walz has pursued a progressive agenda. Last year, he signed into law the right to abortion, preventing any changes by the state's Supreme Court. Along with Illinois, Minnesota has become a haven for women in neighboring states with restrictive abortion laws. Minnesota Democrats have also passed various progressive laws, including paid leave, free college tuition for low-income students, free school breakfasts and lunches, and several tax reforms. Following Harris's announcement, Trump's campaign criticized Walz as a far-left extremist. He also faced Republican criticism for his slow deployment of the National Guard to quell unrest during protests over the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis claimed on X on August 6th that Minnesota was a hotspot for violence in 2020. Harris encouraged it, and Walz let Minneapolis burn. Recently, Walz has drawn attention for his sharp criticism of Trump and running mate J.D. Vance, whom he labeled bizarre. The comments gained significant traction on media and social platforms, with Democratic supporters and Harris's advisors frequently echoing them. Observers suggest these remarks almost became a campaign slogan and were a factor in his selection as Harris's running mate. E.J. Dionne Jr., a columnist for The Washington Post, described Walz as a safe and interesting choice, noting that no other candidate has generated the same level of online enthusiasm. Dionne emphasized that Walz has energized young Democratic voters while facing little opposition within the party. His appeal in small rural towns might make him harder for Republicans to attack. Moreover, Walz's stance on Gaza reportedly contributed to his selection. Amid Democratic divisions over the Gaza conflict, Walz maintained a relatively neutral position, rarely commenting on the issue. On October 7, 2023, he condemned Hamas's horrific attack on Israel in a post on X, expressing sympathy for the victims. After Biden's visit to Israel in October last year, Walz praised the president for securing essential humanitarian aid for Gaza. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a strong contender for the vice presidential spot, is a staunch supporter of Israel and has criticized student protests nationwide. Walz's selection is seen by analysts as Harris's effort to avoid exacerbating Democratic divisions over Gaza in her campaign. Dion Jr. observed that Harris is walking a tightrope on the Gaza issue. Both she and Walz support Israel, but Harris has sought to address Gaza with more empathy toward Palestinians. The scholar speculates that she is trying to prevent Gaza from becoming a focal point of debate in the campaign. However, some experts caution that Harris's choice is not without risk. Minnesota is not a battleground state in this election. No Republican candidate has won there since 1972, and polls suggest Harris is well positioned to extend that streak. On the other hand, Pennsylvania is a state Harris almost certainly needs to win if she aims to become president. It is considered the most crucial battleground in this year's election, and the race there is expected to be extremely close. Governor Shapiro currently enjoys 61% approval in the state. CNN commentator Harry Enton argued that Walz is unlikely to help Harris secure battleground voters. Shapiro has a stronger appeal to white, non-college educated voters in Pennsylvania, a demographic that Walz struggled to win over in Minnesota's election 2 years ago. A Republican strategist noted that Shapiro would pose a greater threat to their chances in November. Trump allies have expressed concerns that Shapiro's popularity with voters could put Pennsylvania beyond their reach. If Harris fails to secure Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes, she would need to win all remaining battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, to clinch the presidency. Nevertheless, faced with strong progressive opposition to Shapiro and the risk of further dividing the party, Harris opted for a more traditional, do-no-harm approach in selecting